Hi everyone, it's Gemma here, and welcome to another podcast from Pulse Social. Today's focus is on female empowerment and how an active lifestyle can support career advancement. I'm pleased to welcome Clara Toombs, a women in leadership coach with over 10 years' experience in digital marketing and managing large teams. Having been in their shoes, Clara has a passion for supporting women to realise their goals and achieve their potential. So hi Clara, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, hi Gemma, hi everyone. So I'm Clara. I am a coach for women in leadership. So I spend a lot of time with women who are working for organisations where they need support in a number of aspects around leadership. Alongside that, I also coach small businesses in terms of marketing, so some marketing consultancy on the side.
Brilliant. So first and foremost, obviously you've had quite an interesting career. Would you like to just tell us a bit about your previous work experience, how you worked your way up to being a women in leadership coach?
Yeah, sure. So I have about 15 years experience in digital marketing. So I've worked for a number of brands that you most likely will recognise. So I've worked for Expedia, Hotels.com, Monsoon Accessorize, and more recently Money Supermarkets. So my specialism is CRM and email marketing. So how I got onto working with women in leadership, it began quite early on actually. I've managed teams for a number of years, over a decade, and within that I've noticed that within teams that I've managed, I've always noticed that women are probably harder on themselves than perhaps their male counterparts. So my management style is very much about coaching and looking at how we can set goals for people to realise their potential. So then in terms of how I arrived at becoming a women in leadership coach today, I was on a leadership program at my last company, and the company that I was studying with approached me to become a coach. And for me, supporting women in leadership has always been a passion of mine. So it felt like a really nice and natural transition for me. My ethos is about equality through equal opportunities. So having experienced and witnessed inequality in the workplace, I wanted to do something about it. I decided to coach women in the workplace, particularly those who are held back for whatever reason. And a high proportion of those that I coach do battle with confidence. So my approach is about building confidence through goal setting. And I work with clients to understand their career aspirations. We then break it down into achievable stepping stones that can be reviewed each quarter. And really, I just want to empower women, more women, to believe that they have the power to really own their career progression and their personal development. And really, it's not about waiting for someone else to decide it for them.
Yeah, that's really brilliant ethos. And it's interesting because you've mentioned such a broad range of companies, and really well-known companies as well. Have you noticed any patterns in terms of women in the workplace, women in leadership, how women are treated?
I think there's been a lot of progression and steps forward, but I don't think we're there yet. So I think a lot of it is to do with women making the choice to really own their own career progression. And actually that then becomes a different conversation because it's all about really what's in our control. Of course, there are factors, and I've experienced it myself, where there are some inequalities in the way that things are structured. Perhaps the promotion process, for example, it can feel very imbalanced still. But I think the more we can do to inspire women to go for opportunities and not to hold themselves back as well, the better it is. And it becomes more about equal opportunities.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just to go back, you did mention about having a couple of career knockbacks yourself. Do you think that was due to your gender? And obviously, did it then help you to drive to support women in leadership?
Yeah, it's really difficult to know precisely if certain knockbacks were due to or solely due to being female, but I think everyone has experienced some form of knockback in their career. And I would say that I think as you move up the career ladder, you will experience setbacks. And sometimes, there are decisions that are being made that perhaps, we should be questioning. Are the right people being hired for the role in question? So I do recall actually going for a promotion many, many, many years ago, and I was up against a male colleague. We were on par in terms of skill set and experience, and he got the job, and I was devastated. I prepared so hard for the interview, and I felt I was left with a lot of this kind of energy that I wanted to do something with. So I decided to just plough into the next 6 months, really closing in on any development opportunities, just really honing in on the skills that perhaps my superiors thought was missing. And then later that year, I did get promoted. So I think that lesson taught me about resilience. And also it's so easy to perhaps take that knockback as quite a or take it personally, but I wanted to do something with that energy, and I think for me it was just about how can I progress, how can I actually become even better, how can I reach the goals that are set for this particular goal, for this particular role. So I think there are many women out there that are experiencing knockbacks due to being female, but I don't think that should stop us at all. I think it should make us all more determined to achieve the goals that we want to be achieving. The worst thing that can happen for me is to see women not try or stop trying because of various setbacks. I think it should just strengthen you and make you more determined.
Yeah, and that's a really admirable mindset. But, as you say, you've noticed that women seem to lack confidence much more than their male counterparts. So is that something that you come across a lot in your work?
Massively. Not only in my recent, career within various marketing roles, but also as a coach. I think it's a huge theme. And actually, when you delve further into this, and when you look at the facts, a lot of women are performing exceptionally well. They're beating their targets, they're doing fantastically well at work, yet there is a gap between how they perceive themselves and how others perceive them, and often colleagues and their managers perceive them as very successful and very good at their jobs, but unfortunately many females feel very much about they lack confidence in their own abilities. So my approach is about goal setting and really ensuring that they can feel like they're working towards that next step, and through that they will build confidence.
Yeah, and I wonder, because from what I understand, you played sport a lot when you were younger. So do you think that that's maybe given you, I don't know, not an aggression, but a drive to kind of succeed where perhaps other women lack confidence?
Yeah. So for me, sport has really helped me be more resilient. You can't win every match. So I really enjoy playing netball in my spare time, and it's something I started playing as a child. But what I can learn from sport is that not everything goes to plan. You won't win at every match, as I mentioned, but you can take the learnings from that and take that forward into your next match. And I think that's true for business as well. I think that any sort of team sport can help you really develop your collaboration your collaborative approach to any project, any challenge. And I think that working together, you can achieve great things. But alongside this, trust as well is integral to any team, whether it be in sport or business.
Yeah. So you obviously feel that sport has really helped you, I guess, in business. You mentioned teamwork, and I kind of wonder how you feel about mixed group dynamics in the workplace. You know, do you feel that, you know, women enjoy working with men, or that they kind of prefer to be on an all-female team, so to speak?
I have worked in fashion, and so I've worked with an all-female group, and I would say my preference would be to have a mixed group. And the reason for that is I think diversity is even more important within the workplace more than ever. I think I would feel that way if I worked with all men. I really like the diversity that a workplace can offer. So for me, my preference is to work within a mixed environment. But I mean, you know, everyone has their own preferences. I think by having a diverse range of people, views, opinions, thoughts, you can come up with much better solutions together. And I think it's great, and it's a healthy thing to promote inclusion in a sense that everyone's ideas are welcomed.
Yeah, and I suppose the more that we encourage both men and women to work together, the more we're going to see less of those gender divides, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, you know, I think for me, I'm very careful not to be about essentially what I'm trying to say is I'm supportive of all opportunities, and I think it just has to be equal. I think, you know, equally there are men in leadership that struggle with confidence, and I don't think we should assume for any moment that you know all men are, but I would say that women tend to be less confident in certain situations, particularly say going for a promotion, for example. So I think for me, having that mix, we can all learn from each other, and you know it should be inclusive. And I think an environment where it's perhaps more so one gender than the other, I feel perhaps isn't as diverse as it could be.
Yeah, and obviously bringing it back to confidence, you would think that if we encourage more of this collaborative working, then that will encourage women to speak up more, regardless of the environment that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. I was working with a client actually earlier this week who said to me, I'm terrified of putting my hand up in meetings. The whole idea of speaking out intimidates me. And when you delve into it, there is no evidence around. Sometimes it could be linked to like a past experience, but I think, you know, in those scenarios, it's about taking baby steps. So start to put your hand up for things that, you know, may be quite small to begin with, but also remember that your idea actually could be a game changer. Your idea could add so much value to the meeting, and by not sharing it, you're, you know, holding your team back, holding the business back. You could be onto a great idea. So it's about just changing the mindset of how you can start to put your hand up, and it takes time, but it is completely achievable.
Absolutely, you know, and bringing it back to your experience in sport, I guess, you know, you know, obviously it completely helps develop, you know, team working skills, social skills, all of that good stuff. So have you noticed that having good hobbies outside of work kind of helps with career development in a way?
Yes, absolutely. I think mind and body are connected. I think that if you can have a healthy body, it's a healthy mind. So any sort of exercise, any kind of sport that you can participate in, and look, I get it. It's turning into darker evenings, winter, it's cold, But I think actually having hobbies that can help you, work off maybe the stress of the week, or just have an outlet for energy. A lot of us are working from home and we don't have the opportunity to perhaps be out and about in pre-COVID, for example. So I think any sort of exercise you can do to help de-stress, to help just to help clear your mind, really. It could be running, it could be anything you enjoy. I think the more you can do, the better. But don't give yourself a hard time if you're not achieving perhaps some high goals that you've set. I think it's all about taking those small steps forward.
Yeah, definitely. And the statistics about career burnout, it's incredibly high, especially at the moment where a lot of people are working from home, and you maybe put pressure on yourself to do even more work than if you did in the office. So I guess it's really important to take that time for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced it myself where particularly during lockdown, I was working very long hours at home, so staring at a screen all day, and then I had trouble sleeping because I was going straight from my desk to my lounge and not really having any time to think about any sort of exercise. But now I do make an effort to ensure I'm getting out, I'm doing exercise, I'm having, getting fresh air. Because I think it's very, very easy for us to be staring at our screens since a lot of us are still working from home. So I think, it's just about making a conscious effort to do something where you can get some fresh air, start to kind of feel like you're having an impact on your physical health.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think perhaps there's more that workplaces could do to encourage a healthy social life? So whether that's perhaps starting a little football team that can happen after hours and stuff like that, do you think that would be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. When I worked for Expedia, that was a really that was one of the great things about working for a large organisation. You're bound to find other people in the same boat that have a similar interest as you. And there was a netball team at Expedia. There's other groups as well, like hockey, all sorts of kind of team sports that you can join, football, of course. So I think if you can do anything with work colleagues, what a great way to collaborate and also build those team relationships outside of the office environment. I think sport is a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose beyond that, what is kind of your feeling on how leaders, and managers could support female development more?
There's always more that can be done. I think what I'm actually noticing more and more is that the message needs to be clear to both female and male managers, people in any kind of people management responsibility, to really ensure that women are getting the opportunities that their male counterparts are. There is the aspect of cultural ways of working, principles within existing organisations that they're the sort of things that we continue to want to break down those barriers. But equally, the way I also see there being another way to kind of take ownership of this is to for women to really own their own career development. So you can completely create a plan that becomes your agenda for your career progression. Many women I meet are disappointed that their manager hasn't put them forward for promotion yet, whereas they're seeing perhaps their male colleagues successfully go onwards to that path to promotion. And my response to that is that you need to take responsibility for your career. No one else will in the same way. And for those of us that have been lucky or are lucky to have a supportive manager, that's great. But I think regardless, I think the only way you can really, one of the only ways I think you can really move forward at a pace that works for you is to really own your career development and make it happen on your own terms. The advantage of that is you don't wait for someone else to dictate when you're promoted and why. And of course, there are various levels of sign off that need to happen potentially, but by being really proactive, you start to, I think, naturally raise your profile, and people want to see and support your career progression.
Yeah, I suppose it all comes back to having that confidence within yourself that you can achieve more than you think you can, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I kind of wondered as well, obviously, we should be empowering ourselves to do great things. But in terms of management, have you noticed any differences between male and female managers and how supportive that they can be?
I think there are differences, of course, with any, you're going to, depending on who you work for, I think there will be differences in management style in the company you work for. There'll be a number of differences. I think it's about also being really clear about what you want from your role within the business. It might be that actually you have a real desire to move forward in the next 6 months. So I think really it's less about gender for me and more about being clear about what you want, regardless of who your manager is. So I think, and where this does come back to gender, is that women tend to be less likely to really proactively pull that plan together. I think once you have got a clear idea of where you want to go and the kind of plan around that, it becomes quite powerful, because you're starting to create this pathway that is something you own. And don't get me wrong, there of course, as I mentioned earlier, there needs to be levels of sign-off, but by the very nature of creating this plan, I think you already starting to be noticed in the business as someone that's being really proactive and actually wants to succeed. And I think, looking back at my own experience, I think that's something I'd love to have done many years ago, is taken more ownership of my career at the time.
That's really interesting, that that your experience shows that really, again, it comes back to the self, and I suppose directness of communication is really important.
Yeah, I experienced a time actually a few years ago where I was in quite a junior management role within a business, and I had a manager that just was quite brutal. He shared with me that he thought I'd never make it as a leader, and that set me back maybe 1 or 2 years, because I felt actually that my confidence took quite a knock, and then it's only when I realised that was just his opinion, and I think we can choose how we respond to the feedback we get, and once I realised that, I actually managed to plough forward. I became head of team for the last 6 years. I've managed large scale teams, and I've found it really rewarding, being a leader, being in a leadership position. So I think we should think about how we choose to respond to feedback, because sometimes that feedback can be really constructive and really helpful. Other times it can just be something we choose to disregard because it's not helpful, and it can really take us off our path and take us away from perhaps the path we're on. So I would just say, look at the kind of feedback you're receiving. Is it constructive? Is it helpful? Is it coming from a good place, regardless? And if it's not helpful, then disregard it.
That's a really powerful realization to come to, actually. And I suppose that's not advice, that's someone's opinion, so it's really important to be able to distinguish the two and actually realise you're not ever going to be able to please everybody. So, you know, if it's constructive advice, of course, that's really helpful. But if it's a negative opinion that's not really coming from any basis of fact, then it's really important to put that in perspective.
Absolutely. And I think my only regret, and it's not a huge one because I know I then did something about it. It's just more that it delayed me. It put me off moving forward more quickly. I then moved into a new company, but I perhaps slowed down in terms of I'd always been quite ambitious up to that point. And, sometimes setbacks are there for a reason, to help you really realise actually what's the learning from this. And I think once you get to the point where you think, actually, I don't value that person's opinion, they're not really important in terms of my career progression, I'm going to actually move forward and actually go into a leadership position because I know I can. So these things could perhaps be said off the cuff and might not mean much to that person, but yeah, my advice to kind of any woman out there, whatever stage you're at, is we can choose how we respond to feedback. And, if it's useful, if it's constructive, if it helps you in any way, great, take it on board. If it's just negative without any constructive, if it's not constructive in nature, then disregard it. It's pointless, even thinking about it anymore. It's just something we have to push past us.
Yeah, that's really important. And do you think that that kind of way of thinking and the advice that you give can just help people, not just in business but in their life generally as well?
Yeah, I've coached a number of women and also managed a number of women and hired a number of women in the past. And I think that there is a feeling of limiting self-belief. So the feeling that you're not good enough, or the feeling that you're an imposter. So imposter syndrome is very common. And I think actually there's a lot that we can look at and develop in ourselves. My advice is to go for it. If you want to go for a promotion but you're not sure, or there's something that you want to put your hand up for that you think, I don't feel I have all the skills necessary, just put your hand up, just go for it. You don't want to live a life of regret. So I think you've got nothing to lose. And so what, if you don't get it, if you don't get the job, if you don't get put on the project, you can find out why and learn from it, and then be able to really focus on those aspects. So I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy and holding ourselves back. The other thing I'd like to share in terms of advice is that there are so many ways to achieve success in terms of our career path. So, for example, if you have a real desire to move into a specific role that you don't feel ready for, then look at getting a mentor. The benefit of this is that this person succeeded in the path that you want to take. So you can think about, what can I learn from them that will accelerate my own learning? So rather than it take me 5 years, I can perhaps in 6 months really push forward with my learnings because I've learned so much from this particular mentor. So think about how they succeeded, ask them how, what steps did they take to get to where they are today, and what advice would they give you? So I mean, overall, I think as much as women, we've just got to start owning our own career progression, so that it's as much as on our own terms as it can possibly be. And I think, by that very nature of owning your career progression, you're going to feel a lot more confident because you're in control.
Yeah, what an absolutely fantastic sentiment to end on. I think that's about all we've got time for today. Clara, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.